Okay. Cool. Sorry I am late. Uh was eating a piece of bread a minute ago, but that is not why I'm late. I am late because they locked me out of my Google account and it took me a minute to get back in for some reason. But dang, the bread was good. Sourdough. Sourdough is delicious. Okay. Lots to go over today, actually. Um, we are going to discuss my first disagreements with Chris Langan after watching the entirety of his 4-hour interview with Kurt from Theories of Everything. It is a great interview. I highly suggest that you check it out. But in the past, I have had no disagreements with the CTMU. It was the only piece of work that I have yet to disagree with. As far as I know, I mean, I don't study it in depth, but I am going based off of what the creators of it say. So I have fundamental disagreements with Wolfram because he believes that the universe is intelligent but not conscious. That's a serious. I mean, that is a total disagreement. It's not just like a small detail. It is a diverging that is total. And I found some with Chris Langan that I think is almost to that level. And I am a bit surprised because I didn't think that there was any very serious diverging. It was just maybe a difference in focus, difference in structure. But thus far, I had always agreed with the implications of the CTMU. But Chris stated on that interview that he said we were overpopulated, we have finite resources, and we need to have less children. And if this is implied by the CTMU, which I imagine he would claim that it was, then the CTMU and Sentient Singularity Theory are vastly divergent because they seem to disagree on the nature of meaning if both of us are maintaining consistency in our ideology. So if one of us hasn't just, been human and been lacking of coherence between our emotional perspectives and the implications of our theory, then we seriously disagree, and there is some difference in the definition of meaning between the CTMU and Sentient Singularity Theory. And Sentient Singularity Theory describes meaning as the positive impact that you have on another sentient being, or the impact that you have on another sentient being. So there's like objective meaning and subjective meaning. Eric Weinstein has talked about this before. He said there's two types of meaning. He said, I forgot what he called them, but they were, what were they? Let's see here. I think I actually wrote them down. Proximate meaning and ultimate meaning. So proximate meaning would be when you're impacted by another sentient being, and ultimate meaning would be when you impact another sentient being. That's what I define it as in Sentient Singularity Theory. This and the part of the reason for creation of multiplicity within oneness by oneness of sentient oneness of existence, God, is to maximize meaning. And so you maximize meaning by maximizing the number of sentient beings and maximizing your impact on those sentient beings. But if you create sentient beings, then you are all impactful on those sentient beings, and therefore you are exponentially maximizing meaning. And so if you are trying to have less children, you are not maximizing meaning, because you are not maximizing the number of sentient beings. And if you're not creating those sentient beings, then you are not all meaningful to those sentient beings. And any meaning that you do have to those sentient beings is not as great as the meaning that you would have if you had created those sentient beings. So this is why it seems inevitable that the CTMU would disagree with the Sentient Singularity Theory on the definition of meaning. And that is huge, because it is not only is meaning a fundamental aspect of being and of existence and of the universe and of the theory of Every0ne, but it is also the primary motivator of the creation of multiplicity of consciousness within oneness. And it is also the primary, because it's the primary motivator, it's the primary goal. So that's primary. Like, that's essential. It's a serious difference. It's not small, which I am, quite frankly, amazed. I know a lot of people have discussed with me before that, and this isn't just a phenomenon found with Chris Langan, but people like to pick fights with the guy who appears to be within the intellectual pursuits. People try and pick fights with the guy who seems to be dominant in the room, which is, the guy who seems smartest in the room. Obviously, Chris Langan with a 200 IQ seemed like he would often be that guy. And people like to pick fights with him essentially just to, see if they can knock down the biggest guy, essentially. And I understand that gets very annoying. This also happens to Eric Weinstein. I've been following this Tim, what is his name? Oh man, it doesn't even really matter, but I'm going to say it anyways. Tim Langan? I don't know how to pronounce your last name, sorry. But he is a quantum physicist who works for Google AI, and I've been on some calls with him and Eric, I believe, in the past. And Tim published a paper refuting geometric unity, or attempting to. And some of the criticism may be legitimate, but it also appears like there is some bad faith motivating the criticism, because one of the people is asking to remain anonymous. I don't understand that. That seems like you're not putting... If you're proposing an idea in science or politics or anything, if you're not willing to put your neck out when you put your idea out, then you shouldn't really be taken that seriously. Now, people will say things like, well, what about, Satoshi Nakamoto and the, Bitcoin? It's like, that guy created something. He created something that was tangible, essentially, digital, but you get it. That you could see, touch, prove, interact with. It wasn't a theory that had to be proven. It wasn't anything that his reputation was resting on. It just either worked or it didn't. It was adopted or it wasn't. And I understand, actually, the desire to do that anonymously, no matter who you are, because I would imagine that it was probably done in ultimate good faith, even if it, I'm not like the biggest cryptocurrency guy, but it, you might not want to be linked to it because it might corrupt it. But at the same time, or it was totally in bad faith, and they just don't want us to know that it was like, Jeffrey Epstein or something. But doubt it. But it is essential to stick your neck out for regarding the things that you believe in. If you have no consequence, and you're going up against somebody who does, because they're not anonymous and you are, then that is not a fair fight. That's like, causing somebody to fight with one eye or something, and you have, both eyes. Or if you agree to fight, Floyd Mayweather, and he is not anonymous and you are, if you lose, does your reputation doesn't take a hit. But if Floyd Mayweather loses, his reputation is going to take a hit. And this is why it is essential that you truly put your neck out there for your ideas. And if you truly believe in your ideas, then you shouldn't have a problem not being anonymous. Men these days have a tendency to have anonymous accounts online because of doxing, and just our relationships online are just not good. And I understand you want to say things online, you want to have discussions online, you don't want to be doxed for them in the future, but be impeccable with your word. And I can tell you from experience that if you say something that you believe is true and that you have said in a kind manner, it doesn't matter if you're doxed for it, you won't care. You'll be annoyed, but you're not going to regret it. If you say something that's cruel purposely and then you're doxed for it, you're going to regret it. But if you don't say anything that's cruel purposely, then you're not going to regret it, even if you are doxed for it. So, but this guy, Tim, criticized geometric unity in his paper, and, I don't think that it's right to be expected to be taken extremely seriously. I'm not saying you don't have legitimate, critiques. I'm just saying don't expect to be taken with any serious legitimacy, taken seriously to the degree of having, serious legitimacy in any debate. If you aren't, one, willing to stick your neck out on the line and not be anonymous in your statements, and two, you have to have an alternative hypothesis or idea in addition to your negative critiques. You have to say, I don't agree with Chris Langan because my theory states this and this and this, which is the opposite because of this. I can't just sit here and say Chris Langan is an idiot because he thinks that we shouldn't have kids. That would be wrong. First of all, Chris Langan is not an idiot, but I do think that this idea is wrong. But I have an alternative idea, and that's why I disagree with him. How would I even know if I disagreed with him? One of the things that I've encountered a lot with this work is that people will make critiques, and they'll say, I'll ask, what is Bach periodicity? Because they'll tell me I don't know what it is, for some math PhD. And they'll be like, well, I don't know what it is exactly. I can't explain it, but it's not that. It's not what you think it is. That is ridiculous. And it is against the fundamental nature of orientation. So when you look at the four primary perspectives that I'm writing a paper on, inside and outside are dependent. Separate and oneness are dependent. Something is one. If you think about a consciousness, you are one with yourself because you are separate from others. You are separate from others because you are one with yourself. You are inside the universe because it is outside of you. This type of thing is a binary, a dependent binary of perspectives. And this is also true of critique. And so if you want to have serious critiques, not just like, hey, I think your math there, that equation looks a little wrong. It's different than saying like, I have destroyed your entire 69-page theory, of geometric unity, or your, entire theory of sentient singularity theory. I don't know how you would disprove geometric unity completely. I'm not familiar enough with it to say that, but I mean, philosophically, I could tell you, but I don't know what Eric would be looking for as disproving, but I would say the only way to disprove sentient singularity theory is to show that, you're not sentient and existence is not sentient. And so if existence isn't a sentient being and we aren't sentient beings, then sentient singularity theory is wrong. Totally. Not just like needs revision, but totally wrong. And like I need to give up, not just, go back to the drawing board and figure out, some serious redos of some serious, aspects of this work. I would just give up. But the thing is people will say, well, that's not falsifiable. It's not falsifiable, but whether or not, existence is a sentient being. Maybe it's not falsifiable because it's true. Do you realize that you cannot falsify something that's absolutely true? Like, you can't. And I understand falsifiability is like theoretical kind of. It's like, could you theoretically falsify it? Sure, I think you could. Like, if I think that you could falsify the idea that, you are sentient, or that humans are sentient. Couldn't falsify the idea that you are sentient, really, because you have to be sentient in order to falsify the idea that you are sentient. But the thing is that if that's the case, to say, oh, it's not falsifiable, so therefore it's not legitimate. It's like, maybe it's not falsifiable because it's just true, and you can't falsify an objective truth. So, it's not Hawaii in here. I don't know what happened to my buttons. But, this is insane. Like, the way that we're doing science and the way we're doing critiques is insane. I had stated in some Twitter arguments that are going on between me, essentially, and Tim, the guy who wrote that paper, and Luis Razzo, who actually was on this, show, and we interviewed him, or I interviewed him. And I like Luis a lot. He's welcome back anytime, but I disagree with him tremendously. He's basically saying that Eric Weinstein is suppressing ideas and engaging in essentially censorship, or the disc, as Eric calls it, because he's not willing to have Tim on his podcast. Like, if you write a paper that's refuting somebody's mathematics, that's fine. I mean, Eric addressed them, not, defending Eric. There are things that I'm not defending Eric for the sake of defending Eric. There are things that I seriously disagree with Eric on. I don't understand how warp transportation is, going to not just magnify and our problems and destroy the buffer of distance that we have, which is, not saying that it's much of a buffer, but it's there, versus like if you can travel any distance in an instant, then it's almost like distance doesn't exist. It's not like, oh, now we can really get away from each other. It's like, now we can never get away from each other, not even for a little bit. And so I have disagreements with Eric, but that's not like the same as writing a paper that is purely negative, that is just ripping down ideas left and right, coming to a conclusion that, it's all there, that their, theory is all wrong, which, by the way, geometric unity is not all wrong. Geometric unity is definitely a step in the right direction, 100%. I would bet a lot on that. Like, betting sentient singularity theory on that, essentially, because they have similar implications. And, my theory is not built from geometric unity. I don't speak math like Eric, so I couldn't even write the things that he does. But I know that the philosophical implications are the same, and that we both start from essentially X4, as he calls it, or the 4 primary perspectives that I'm writing a paper on that will be released within the next month. We're going to talk about it later. And, but, I said in that Twitter discussion that if you have a limited amount of time, which you do, you should play with other players in the game. Okay? Meaning, if you have a theory of everything, you should discuss it with other members, other people who have their own theories that they're working on. And instead of wasting your time just, yelling on the field and getting in a fight with somebody in front of everybody who was like an anonymous dude screaming from the stands, being a skeptic or a critic. I hate this ideology of skepticism. It is a purely destructive ideology. It is not constructive at all. And we think that this is science, and it's not. And so this geometric unity refutation paper by Tim Langan, or whatever his last name is, I don't know how to pronounce it, sorry. It is a purely destructive piece of work. Like, purely destructive piece of work. Why would you even want to waste your time on a purely destructive piece of work? It's one thing to make critiques and make criticism, and I get on here and I make criticism and critiques all the time. It's fine. But I also am the primary, theme of this is my work. And everything that I think is wrong and that I critique is critiqued through the lens of my work, which is a positive piece of work. It is constructing something. It isn't just destructing something. And I don't agree with this idea of like, is it falsifiable? Okay, can you destroy it? That is what that's asking. Can you destroy it? It's like, well, what if you did stumble upon the truth and you can't destroy the truth? Should we not take it seriously because you can't destroy it? Why should we take something seriously that you can destroy? It doesn't make sense. It's just, science is just, it almost doesn't even exist. And it only exists at the very, very, very upper echelons of, scientific achievement. And I don't mean that as far as like Nobel Prizes or PhDs or even experimentation. I mean, to some degree, experimentation, but I mean that as far as like, especially experimentation, first creation, like this work, then experimentation, which is coming, and then engineering, which is also, coming. I have an engineering project built from the, the implications of sentient singularity theory. I have an experiment to test some implications implied by sentient singularity theory. And I'm writing papers and have a website and stream twice a week, have a call once a week. Like, this is constructive piece of work. And every critique that I make of other people's work should be through the lens of, that's wrong, I think, because this is right. You don't just go, that's wrong. And here's a paper about it by some dude and some other dude who's anonymous. It's just ridiculous. And, Eric doesn't need me to defend him. Tim is, anybody who doesn't have their own theory and just proposes a destruction of somebody else's is not worth your time engaging with publicly and, in something that takes as much investment as like a full-on podcast discussion. You should say what Eric has said of, that was a legitimate criticism. That one is not. That one will be reconciled, and that one I'm still working on, or something like that. And it's like, okay, fair enough. Why does it need anything else? Do you need to just repeat what's already in both of your papers to each other just for the sake of like likes and shares and eyes? No. So Tim doesn't understand this. I think that it is bad faith. Like, people think that acting in bad faith means you think you're doing something wrong and you're doing it. That's not true. Acting in bad faith is when your goal is to destroy only, not for the sake of building. Even if you've convinced yourself that, if it's wrong, we should prove it wrong. No. If it's wrong, you should build something better. Like, this is so true in politics right now too, is like, people will be like, you know, if you were really scared of, coronavirus, then you would close the border. It's like, change my mind. I saw that one yesterday or today. And it's just useless. It's not even that, it doesn't matter whether or not it's subjectively true or not. It's useless. It's not constructive. It's just attacking. It's just destructive. I'm, like I said, I have disagreements with Chris Langan. I want to talk about them. But they're coming from a constructive structure. And Chris Langan's entire work is not wrong. Like, Chris Langan, I don't know how he actually got to that idea that we shouldn't have children, and that essentially, like, comfort is the purpose of life. Like, and he said that because essentially he had said that you shouldn't have children. If your children would be born with a genetic disease, then you shouldn't have those kids. And if he means like you should essentially choose not to have children instead of having a child that has a disease, or you should maybe, I don't know, like abort those children. I don't know what the details are, so it's hard to say. But if he's just saying, well, we need to change it so that, somebody that did have a genetic illness no longer has a genetic illness, but we should still have, maximize the amount of children being born, that's one thing. But that's not what he said. He said we're having too many kids. I don't know how you get to that conclusion with everything else that he believes in, which is remarkably accurate and in alignment with sentient singularity theory. I mean, his statements in that interview regarding a theory of everything needing to be generative. This is what I say all the time: is a theory of everything is a theory of growth. This is remarkable how aligned my statements are with Chris Langan's. And to arrive at such a fundamental difference as, we have too many kids, stop having kids, versus have children, stay married, but have, lots of children, more children than 2, at least 3. I mean, that is, to me, a theory of growth, a theory of generativity. I don't know if this was just a lapse in consistency between his one idea of his and another, which is very possible. We're all human. Everybody does that. Or if it is, an implication of the CTMU, which I will speak to him about and get the answer, and then I will report back. But and I hope I get an honest one. But I don't understand how he got to this, given our alignment with almost everything else, and to diverge that seriously is huge. There was one other disagreement that we had. He believes that consciousness cannot manifest inside of a quantum computer, which I believe it can, if it's also linked to other structures that create the right constraints and degrees of freedom. I think he's wrong on this. But that's less of a serious disagreement. It's a big disagreement, but it's not a disagreement on the implications and definition of meaning, essentially, which is huge. So, and I've been looking for differences and disagreements for a while, because he's, like I said, the CTMU and his work and his statements about it are the only ones that I've yet to find disagreement with until last week. And those are still the only 2 disagreements that so far I have, is that, but he's also, and so am I, so I'm not criticizing him here, but he's an emotional guy. Like, you have to be an emotional guy in order to, like, do this type of work, because emotions are the motivator of action. So if you're going to work on something no one else is really working on around you, and invest that type of work and years and years of work in something that can't really be proven by anybody that you know, you need to be kind of an emotional person in order to like have that motivated. Sourdough is legit, but I think challah is still my favorite. Challah is the best. It's definitely the best. Sourdough is so good, but challah is the best. I appreciate a kind of rye sourdough swirl. That sounds great. Nihilism. I don't think Chris Langan is nihilistic. I think it's pronounced Nguyen. Tim Nguyen. That makes sense. I don't mean to be an asshole about anybody's name, so Tim Nguyen. I do apologize. I disagree sincerely with your focus on regarding physics, but I apologize for botching your name. I did think about inviting him on here, not to discuss geometric unity. I actually have very little interest in his critique of geometric unity that are mathematical. I would like to know maybe his philosophical critiques of geometric unity, but he needs a positive philosophical assertion in order to make, philosophical critiques of geometric unity. And I don't think he even knows much about the philosophical implications of geometric unity. But I mean, his math, I'm not going to criticize his mathematical critiques of geometric unity because I can't. I mean, I'm just not mathematically literate enough to do that. But I can tell you that anybody that thinks that just because you are involved in physics or math, that you can critique this field, essentially, of the theory of everything, or everyone, you cannot. Very much, at least, because it's not math, it's not physics. We think that physics and math are fundamental in science, and the reality is that if you are looking for a theory of everything, physics and math is not fundamental. Chris Langan correctly describes it as like meta-computation, or like pre-computation, or like proto-computation. And that, or Stephen Wolfram calls it meta-mathematics, and what it really is metaphysics. Quantum physics is metaphysics. It's just we've erased consciousness from the. We're trying to erase consciousness from the field, and so we call it quantum physics. But it's not even the same field as, the relativistic or Newtonian physics. It's just an entirely different field, and it is metaphysics. It is mental. Structure. That's what it is. It's mind. It is the study of mind, and is what quantum physics really is, which is metaphysics, and it is not physics. So you can't just critique it from physics. Some of the rules change. You can't just this is why nobody can unite quantum mechanics and general relativity, is they're not the same field. They're not even two subcomponents of the same field. They're two sides of one coin that is, how we perceive existence, but they're not the same field. One of them is, it is geometric and relativistic, and it's computational. The other is like meta-computational. It's meta-mathematical. It's not mathematical. It's metaphysical. It's not physical. It's different because you're dealing with perspectives of consciousness. You're not dealing with, and the components of consciousness. You're not just dealing with a calculated, action or movement or structure. You're dealing with the calculators of that structure, not and the aspects of those calculators, which are sentient beings, not the calculated structure, which is what general relativity, is the study of. So it's very different. But yeah, Tim Nguyen. I can't wait to hear about the experiments. I have one, and that is the most important one. There was another one that we were discussing on the Discord discussion last week, actually. I forgot what it was, though. But there is one experiment. When I first had my revelation, I will call it, of like the theory of everything, I knew immediately that I had gotten a glimpse, not solved, gotten a glimpse of essentially the theory of everything. And in an instance, I was just upstairs in my bedroom. I just got home from work, and I just, wow. There we go. Needed to crack my knuckles. Had a glimpse of interaction that could be tested in an experiment, and I knew the implications of that. If that had proved out in an experiment, I knew why. I could see why it was happening, and that's why I thought about it. And from there, it was like I understood the universe, and I went downstairs, and I looked at some friends of mine who were my roommates at the time. I was like, I understand that this is gonna sound insane, and I don't expect you to believe me, and I wouldn't believe me, and you shouldn't believe me, but I have to just tell someone, so I'm telling you. Pretty sure I figured out the theory of everything in one instant of a thought. And it was regarding that experiment that I'm working on eventually getting done. And the implications of it are what led to me even thinking that this was possible. So it is crazy how it wasn't like I was just working on it and working on it and working on it. Eventually it was it's the theory of everything. Was working on, as I've discussed before, artificial general intelligence or technological general intelligence and the inevitable constraints, degrees of freedom, and desires, actions, etc., and the political implications of artificial general intelligence or technological general intelligence, and whether or not it would save us from our inevitable doom, our inevitable dooming of ourselves via, our own technology, and or whether or not it would just, not change anything, we would just still be doomed. And it would just be another aspect of that doom. And I was working on that for quite some time, so I was really mapping what the structures of mind were. And then I realized that they were lining up with physics, and then I started looking at that, and because I had an epiphany of why you couldn't go faster than the speed of light, because I realized it was the speed of causality, not just the speed of light, as itself light that's separate from other things. It's just actually that it is the speed of causality, which really means that it is the speed of perception. So light is your ability to perceive. If you can perceive something, darkness is the absence of, the perception of structure, and light is the observation of, some type of energy or structure. And the speed of light is really your ability to perceive. It's the speed at which you can perceive, within the universe. It's not, and the limit of your ability, of the speed of your ability to act, as well, within relativity. It's not the speed of light. Like, I think photons are not what we think they are, but um, you know, I mean, they're obviously a wave, but there are perception of a wave, and the interaction between that wave and our perception, which is that speed of our perception, is probably influenced by the wave and the structure of the wave, the frequency of that wave, amplitude of that wave. Also, possibly the state of the universe itself, so like the RAM speed of the universe, essentially, that may vary. The interaction of those two things is what creates the perception of photons. I don't think that they don't actually exist. It's like an electron. You're just perceiving a wave. Same thing with the photon. You're just perceiving an instance or a point on a wave. That's what it is. And so photons and electrons are very, very similar, actually, in some ways, because they're both don't objectively exist. They're both just waves of the universe moving, essentially. And so, yeah, I mean, bosons I'm still working on the details of. It might be that you're the one who's causing the wave to some degree of change by the act of observation, and that's what creates the perception of photons. And then electrons, the perception of electrons is due to you perceiving the wave of the universe acting, versus photon is you acting via the act of observation. I don't know yet, but you're clearly, no matter what, you're perceiving a point on a wave, versus like quarks, which are the fingers of the universe. They're not due to your perception. They objectively exist, versus they're just force points. They're literally like, they exist like my fingers exist. Oh man, I wish I had like... This might work. This is a snake bag for catching snakes. But if you look here and you see there is a point where my finger is, that is a force point. Okay? So you can kind of see, this is a little bit difficult, but here's a force point, here's a force point, and here's a force point, and they can manipulate, via spin and charge, existence and animate it. And basically, you can't see that they're attached to the same hand, essentially, which is attached to the same being, just like your hand is attached to you. But an electron is not an objectively existing structure. The wave that you're perceiving is. And same thing with a photon, but just photon may come from you. And an electron, the wave is coming from the universe, but a photon, the wave may be coming from you. It might be the reverse of that in reality as well. It's tough because it depends on, and I'll explain why this gets difficult, where you are standing. So if you are looking at an atom, you're looking at the electrons around an atom, it might be that those electrons that you perceive, those points of a wave that are electrons, electron points, those are coming from the wave, are perceptions of the wave coming from the universe. But if you are the atom, it might be a wave coming from you. And a photon might be the wave coming from you, if you essentially are the atom. But then from the perspective of the universe, it may be that it is coming from itself, essentially, instead of from you. So it's kind of like how I'm trying to describe separate, and I keep going back and forth of, is separate inside of oneness or is it outside of oneness? Because if you are God, separate means, and there is nothing outside you, separate inherently means inside of you, so inside of oneness. But if you are not God and you are existent within God already, moth, then that moth made me lose my train of thought. If you are existent within God, then separate means outside of oneness, not inside of oneness, because it's outside of your oneness, but it's inside of God's oneness. Does that make sense? So this is why it gets complicated, and you have to pick which one to choose to focus on. And are you looking at it from a first-person perspective of you or a first-person perspective of God? And I have not yet decided what to focus on regarding the primary perspectives. I'm probably going to have to just describe both of those. And I was kind of hoping to avoid that, but I don't think that I can. I've tried. Because it really is, oneness really is separate. It would be inside of separateness, because if you are separate, then it's because you are one with yourself. So it's inside of your own separateness. And also oneness is outside of separateness because it is beyond your separateness if you're inside of the universe and the perspective is from the universe. So it's a coin. It's like saying, is the coin heads or tails? It's both. And it depends on which side you're looking at. But you can't look at both sides at the same time of a coin. That's the fascinating thing about a coin. So here's a quarter. You cannot look at heads and tails at the same time. You can try, but you're just going to get a picture of nothing. You have to choose to look at tails or choose to look at heads. Okay? So this is true of perspective as well. You have to choose to perceive a perspective or consider a perspective from the perspective of the head or from the perspective of the tail. But you cannot look at both at the same time. You will perceive nothing if you try. You just have to know that there is a head and there is a tails always. Even when you're not looking, they do, co-create each other. They are dependent, so if one exists, so does the other. And this is the trouble with this work, is that any kind of theory of mind has to be a theory of mind and a theory of matter, because matter is perceived by the mind. Matter is what matters. Okay, so that's what it is. And it's mind that objectively exists. It's matter that subjectively exists. But our current scientific narratives are in favor and parrot the idea that matter objectively exists and mind subjectively exists. But that's not true. It's that mind subjectively and objectively exists, and matter subjectively exists alone. So, essentially, kind of. But mind is primary to matter. That is a fact. And so, it's the opposite of what science believes. It's crazy how lost everyone is. It really is. Like, I was talking to some people today about just politics, and also someone, Ethan, who runs the Theory of Everyone Clips channel, which I highly recommend that you subscribe to, Theory of Everyone Clips. Um, definitely subscribe. It is extremely helpful. And if you have any clip ideas from this stream, last stream, any other stream, send them to Theory of Everyone Clips or Ethan on our Discord. And, he can work on, getting them turned into clips. And if you want to help him out with that, talk to him about it maybe. I don't know. It's a lot. I know it's a lot of work to create clips, which is why I don't have time to do it, because I'm streaming for 2 hours almost, every day in some way, shape, or form. So, but this is the problem that I'm running into. The coin problem is what I'm running into regarding my paper right now. But I did get to a specific point I'm going to share with you guys where I'm at right now, because I finally did get my abstract essentially created. Oh, man. Okay, you know what? I know where this is. Airdrop failing. It's definitely my MacBook Air. It's just old. It's planned obsolescence, guys. It's a real thing, and it's stupid. It's remarkable how, like, just good the old MacBook Pros were. You could literally just, replace the battery, replace the hard drive, put in a solid state drive, up the RAM. You could do anything you want. Put in 2 hard drives, 2 solid state drives, and up the RAM. You can't do that with any of Apple's products these days, and it makes none of them pro. You cannot call a product a pro product if you're not able to do maintenance yourself and upgrading yourself and, things like that. Work on it yourself. That is the difference between a pro and not. It's not just this art. See, here's the theory of everything, objectivity related to tech. If you just increase the power, doesn't make something pro. Something that is professional allows for professionals to be professionals and handle shit on their own. That's what it means to be professional, is you can handle your own shit. And it doesn't mean that you're just paid for it. It means like you are a pro. A pro is somebody who's very good. It doesn't just mean somebody who's paid. You're like, well, you're not a professional unless you're paid. No. What is a pro? Someone who's very, very good. And somebody who's competent to the point of, like, they're not dependent on, another pro in that field, really. Like, they are their own pro. And that in tech is somebody who, can manage their own technology, can upgrade to their own, hard drive that they pick, the RAM that they pick, the batteries that they pick, everything that they want. They can do the work themselves, not they don't require you. Come on. Oh, there we go. Finally. This is the abstract to my paper. I am releasing it because that's how I do things, is I release them everywhere. I will also copyright some things, and I'm in the process of doing that, but it's also just essential to like show the world that you did it. So screen share. Perfect. Dang, this really worked out. This is the first page of my paper, Sentient Singularity Theory, the theory of everyone. And the abstract is right here. So, Sentient Singularity Theory describes the totality of existence as a singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. Each sentient singularity perceives four primary perspectives that define relationships, allowing for orientation beyond relativistic contextual descriptions. These four primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness are entangled to form instances of perception of the instance itself by the instance itself. The self-aware instance that compose a sentient singularity are called quanta of consciousness. Given that the primary perspectives are perceived in instances of consciousness, and that someone can only be conscious of perspectives of relationships, a sentient singularity's quantum of consciousness and the entangled primary perspectives that inform it are simultaneously created of and created by each other. This pattern results in oneness of mind composed of the union of a single head string of consciousness built on an assembly of entangled body points of perspective. This united head-body pattern of singularity informing and informed by an entangled assembly of four primary perspectives is the universal and fundamental source code of existence, and it is present and repeating in all instances of objective observation that can be made in any field of study. And it says, beyond the beginning, consciousness exists, existence is conscious, and consciousness is one. And it has kind of the outline of our cosmological verse, blank cosmological verse. But that is the first page. What do you think? The outer time loop of simulation is a good way to think about the speed of light. The interval at which everything is iterated, recalculated. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it. It's the clock speed. Campbell has a 10-minute video summarizing his experience. Will be cool to get your thoughts on it. I can send you the link. Yeah, definitely send me that. I would love to check it out. I know you've probably sent it to me before, but I haven't had time to watch it. I definitely want to. Technically, what I'm referring to would be the Planck time, but they are two sides of the same coin. Yes, that's true. Planck time is part of this clock speed, essentially, but it's how you calculate the structure that creates Planck time is dependent upon the number of conscious beings essentially that are calculating at any given time, but and the interactions being that are occurring between them. Congrats on the wedding. Anyways, carry on about atoms, etc. Thank you. I appreciate it. But yeah, that is the paper. It's the beginning of it. I have like 20 pages written. But I've had 20 pages, almost 20 pages written for a long time. Wrote about 3 pages this week, and I'm planning on writing probably about 10 for pages on the 4 primary perspectives. And then once that's done, I will release it. But I also will be contacting academia, reaching out an olive branch to my philosophy professor from college, who I've not spoken to since I took his class. And I want to show him the paper and see if he'll help me with it at all, because once it's, the first draft is done and, regarding publishing and things like that, edits, because I was the best student he had ever seen, and I didn't take it seriously. I mean, I did. I actually really enjoyed it, but he didn't think I took it seriously because I wasn't interested in it after the class was over. And, but I was very good. It's the best I've ever done in a class. But I haven't spoken to him. He wrote me a letter saying, like, you were like essentially the best student he had ever seen, and the fact that I wasn't interested in it beyond the class kind of annoyed him. And because I had asked him what my grade was going to be, just confirming that I got an A, and he was like, "Yeah, you're getting an A, but like, you're annoying." And but I never even messaged him back about it because I got out of school and got a job, and I was like, that's what I wanted to do. I didn't care about college. I was just ready to leave. And now, out of the blue, I found his number the other day, and he still teaches. He's the head of philosophy, it seems, at the university that I went to, and I'm going to contact him and see what he thinks of the four primary perspectives. Be like, hey, remember me, the guy who never got back to you? But he'll definitely remember me. But I don't know what he'll think about this work. Sometimes you think that that the people who you kind of like, I guess, not look up to, but that you're relying upon as being, your helper within the institutions, ends up really letting you down. I know Elon Musk had this happen with the astronauts that he had hoped would back SpaceX. Basically ended up being paid, it seemed, or being incentivized somehow by the military industrial complex that they had basically become a part of, to just say that this was not the place for private industry, and that it is just the place for governments, and it's dangerous to allow for SpaceX to exist in the world of orbital rockets. And Elon Musk cries in this interview where he's asked, like, how did that feel when your heroes essentially, like, trashed you? And he starts crying. And it just goes back to that statement by Eric Weinstein to Lex Friedman that regarding Lex's opinions of Joe Rogan, which I think should probably just be checked. That's all I'll say. Like, and everybody has to do that sometimes in their life. Check your idols. I'm not saying Joe Rogan is an idol of Lex Friedman. I'm just saying kind of looks like it. But check your idols. And Eric said to Lex, no living heroes, which means check your idols. Like, no living idols other than God. And I think that's very important, because they will let you down. So if I go to this professor of mine and I'm like, hey, look at this like brilliant revolutionary piece of work that will objectify philosophy and turn it into a hard science, and then unite every other field, he might just be like, yeah, this seems like nonsense to me. You were way better when you were just talking about like the ethics of healthcare, which was what class it was. Could be, you never know. Sometimes these things surprise you, because this work is so unique compared to what most people are familiar with, that they usually do tend to reject it, even when you think that they might think it's brilliant. Then all of a sudden you show it to them and you're like, this is nonsense. So if that happens, it's fine. We press on. Right. So that is my paper. Now we're going to look at some work and some clips. This was Chris Langan on generativity. Dang, this is a little... There we go. We got it. definitely going to get faster internet. And then we're going to invite get some more like heavy hitters on here as far as interviews go. I have some people lined up.
But what a theory of reality actually needs is generativity. All right? In other words, at the same time as new states are created, okay, new medium has to be created to go with those states. The medium is constantly being generated. Space-time is constantly being generated. These people imagine that the medium of reality is some kind of fixed array, almost like a computer display, like the one I'm looking at right now, and seeing your face in. Okay? That's what they think reality is. They think it's a kind of like...
This requires the generation of sentient beings, okay? Because atoms and molecules and all these things must be generated. You can't just it's not fixed, but it's also not generated by structures that are different from sentient beings. It's not pixelated or discretized into, pixels that are not either sentient beings or calculated by sentient beings.
Display screen with little pixels, and then that's speaking once again about Irwin. Irwin thinks that he's actually stated that reality has little tetrahedral pixels in it. Okay,
that meaning it's discretized.
Huh? It's discretized, right? Right. It's discretized, and basically that doesn't work. Okay.
He's right. It doesn't work. What Irwin is probably identifying, I think, is that that conscious beings are the little tetrahedrons that are mathematically being mapped in emergence theory, and then Clear is mistakenly believing that it is, the pixelization of existence, but it's actually, even though it is the pixelization of existence, it's not the way that Klee describes it. Where it's not sentient beings. It is sentient beings that are the pixelization. So it's not just, I guess, it's not just pixels. Okay, you are the pixel, or you are the cause of a pixel. Essentially, so like the number of sentient beings could dictate the relativistic size observation of the size of a Planck length. Okay, so like maybe the more sentient beings there are, the higher the definition is of existence. Okay, so if that's the case, tetrahedrons are not the pixels of reality, I don't think. They are... It's that the pixels of reality are manifested by the actual pixels of reality, which are quanta of consciousness, which are sentient beings, and they are the tetrahedrons. It's not what how Klee describes it. So here, you can get more into my paper in a minute, but so here, right here, this is a disagreement that I have with that is occurring between Chris Langan and Eric Weinstein and Garrett Lisi and me. I agree with Chris Langan.
Chris Langan is an autodidact who's known for having the highest recorded IQ in America, and he's conceived of an extremely...
Sorry. Okay.
for such a universe to exist, even for itself. All right? That's an absurdity. It's a little bit like the anthropic principle, but it's the anthropic principle with utility, right? Part of the reason the universe exists is because there are secondary tellers that derive utility from it.
Us.
Otherwise, what is its reason to exist?
These are called quanta of
The universe
consciousness,
just simply exists, and it has big.
or internal sentient singularities within sentient singularity theory. Chris Langan, CTMU, defines them as tellers. This includes you and me and other organisms, cells, and I would say, atoms, hadrons, molecules.
Within it, some telos, some purpose, and one of those purposes is to observe itself through secondary tellers.
That's its structure. In order to exist, the universe must have certain aspects of structure. It must be completely self-explanatory and self-justifying. All right? Because it's closed. It has to provide all of these things for itself. All right? And if it can't provide those things for itself, then its structure is inadequate to support existence. And it will not exist.
Why is that inconsistent with the anthropic principle? Why can't it just be that there are multiple universes, and we can call that all the collection of universes one meta-universe or one large universe, and call that the true universe, let's say?
Well, that's what the CTMU.
Or a universe, which is a collection of verses. A universe is a multiverse, which is actually a chain of verses. That's like what sentient singularity describes it as.
It does. The CTMU incorporates something called a syntactic metaverse. But in terms of how do all those universes that you're talking about putting them all together and collecting them into a set, how do they come into existence? Why? It's the reason. You need to justify it, otherwise it's pointless to hypothecate their existence.
Fact.
What are your thoughts on many worlds generally?
Many worlds is basically if it can exist, it does exist, but it's got things the matter with it. It's Everett's theory, of course. His idea was, well, the Schrodinger equation is deterministic,
Many worlds is crap, and Chris Langan calls it out. He basically says exactly what I say, which is that you're just trying to create, there's not a reason for the divergence of existence in it.
Or one that explains consciousness,
Okay,
or
so
one that explains
this is on the theory of everything.
explanations themselves.
The theory of everything has to explain all of those things, everything. It's to be taken literally. Anybody who doesn't take it literally is making a mistake.
Do you have any thoughts as to the biological origins of life?
I'm sure life originated biologically.
Wrong. But that's, I guess, another divergence between us, is that I don't think life originated biologically. Life exists. There's nothing but life. People that ask, what is the origin of life? There was no origin. It's just God exists. He is alive, so he is his own origin. You could call him the origin of life, but he's not even the origin of life because he exists. Okay? So there is no origin because it just life always existed. In an ever-present and eternal state, life always existed, and then, multiplicity of sentience or multiplicity of life is created. But within, the singularity of life, or singularity of sentience or consciousness, which is God, that life lives. That's it. Death is a non-structure. It doesn't exist. There is no death. There is existence, and that's it. There isn't even non-existence. Non-existence doesn't exist. So it's just life lives, done. Little living things are living within a bigger living thing, which is God. And there was no origin of life, and it's not biological. So he's wrong there. But he's right that a theory of everything must encompass a theory of everything. It is to be taken literally, and it must explain mind and matter, which are actually two sides of one coin. I lost the other coin, but there's another coin. It's like a really shiny penny. So that he's right about. So, but then there's also Garrett Lacey and Eric Weinstein, and they're wrong, or they're lying. But they're wrong even if they're lying, so it doesn't really matter. But here is Garrett Lacey and Eric Weinstein on the same exact question. What is a theory of everything?
I think we're almost at the end of this chapter. And it does feel like it could easily be the final chapter. And by the way, we should clarify that when we talk about a theory of everything, we don't mean a theory that once understood could explain everything you see in your daily universe.
Right.
Love
is still going to be a mystery, of course.
Oh God, you really did that?
Of course I did. But yeah, no.
Ladies file. Form a single file line.
There's evidence. I mean, there.
Love is explained by sentient singularity theory. It is the gravity of consciousness. It is you acting on another sentient being in a way that pushes them forward. So anything you do that is good for someone else is love. And there's objectively perceived love and subjectively perceived love. There's subjective action of love, perceived action of love, and the objective perceived action of love. One of them is the objective perceived action of love is when you do something for somebody and it is good for them. The other side of love is when you do something for someone and you think it's good for them, at least. Even if it's not, you think it. If you think it is, then you are loving them. But it doesn't mean that it's actual love. It's that it's kind of like a failed attempt, actually. But it's not really a failed attempt because you're still loving them, but you're failing to have the impact that you would want. Then there is the perception of being loved, which is when someone acts in a way towards you that they either think is, doing something good for you or is actually good for you. And I think that the most important thing to focus on here is that to define the rest of it is what is actually good, not just what is perceived as good. It's important to recognize that sometimes people think something is good and it's not. But it's still they're trying to love, but we should, if you want to define love, it is when you do something for someone else that is good for them. That is love. It is the gravity of consciousness. It is the force that is imposed on a sentient being by you. And gravity is a force that is consciously imposed on sentient beings by existence, that is animating, and that is, a force that is animating, and animation is good. So lack of animation is, non-existence. But to be animated is to exist. So, it's like God is stepping on the gas. That's what gravity is. It's, stepping on the gas of the car. And you're the car, essentially. And gravity is like the gas that God is stepping on in the driver's seat, kind of. And as the car increases into higher and higher gear, or at a higher and higher speed, then you can lower and lower the gear because it's more self-animated and doesn't require as much force to be animated. This is mass defect in action, essentially, which is, a phenomenon where the sum of the mass of the nucleons in a nucleus is greater than the sum total of the mass of the nucleus weighed as a whole. So, but
In our understanding of physics, as we've learned more particles,
Yeah.
the fundamental particles we've learned about appear to be filling out a complete set. I mean, when you
this is true. Garrett Lisi is very good at what Eric Weinstein calls the beauty method. So is Eric, so am I, and this is how you get things like E8 and geometric unity, which is kind of more abstract to perceive because it's Eric's structure in his head that he's transcribing via the language of mathematics versus like a visual. Or it's also how you get, something like this structure, the beauty method, which is just searching for symmetries. And it's how you know when you have a complete set. A very long time ago, when I started this work, I actually had, I could do some inception here actually. I had language of mathematics versus released this video right here. Oh wow, we have 369 subscribers right now, guys. This is huge. I'm taking a photo of this. It will never be like this again. Dope. Okay, that's a serious moment. Secret of the universe reached tonight. So, the very first video that I had released, other than escaping our academic institutions, was, I call it now Intro to Sentient Singularity Theory, but when I released it, I was writing this paper, and I hadn't even
This is
yet...
my description. I said, I am a quantum philosopher.
I hadn't even yet described
learned-
or labeled it Sentient Singularity Theory. I just called it the Entangled Quantum Force, and it was just a placeholder name because it was a description. It was an entangled quantum force. It was a force of entanglement that, created a single entity. But this was my original abstract, which was the universal and objective source code of existence in all of its fundamental manifestations is a quantum of consciousness. A quantum of something is an individual or irreducible point or particle representative of a given entity, which in this case is a consciousness. A quantum of consciousness is an assembly of entangled perspectives. Given that perspectives can only come from consciousness and a consciousness can only come from perspectives, it would seem that a quantum of consciousness and its entangled perspectives are simultaneously the creation of and creator of each other. This pattern results in a creation of a union of a singular head or mind point of consciousness on top of an assembly of entangled body points of perspective. This united head-body pattern of singularity manifested on top of an entangled assembly of fundamental perspectives is the universal source code of existence and is present and repeating on all scales of the universe and in all fields of study. And I used to say before the beginning, consciousness existed, existence was conscious, and consciousness was one. But this implies time instead of an ever-present, so I changed it to beyond the beginning, consciousness exists. Existence is conscious, and consciousness is one, as opposed to was and existed and before. But I state in here that I've been working on a paper and publicly on their YouTube channels in Every0ne. So it's Every0ne, but instead of with an O, it's a 0. And just one day that this was gone. Here. What I want to discuss today is the 3 models that are... I think it's said it's here. But it's basically, I'm describing that I'm writing a paper and I don't know how to end it. Like, I don't know how you end a paper on the theory of everything, but eventually I think I'll figure out that it's time to wrap it up, That's what I say. You can look it up yourself. But I highly suggest watching this. It's old. Labels have changed. I've gotten much more detailed in the work, but it goes over basically the start of this project, and it really will explain a lot. It's still close enough to where it explains it essentially. But the issue was that I didn't know how to end a paper on the theory of everything. It applies to everything. When do you stop? But if you write a paper on the theory of everything and you describe the pattern that is within everything, and a theory of everything is on the first page of my website, a recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs in all instances of objective observation and an explanation for such a pattern. It's really a theory of everyone. That's the definition of a theory of everything, or a theory of everyone, essentially. And that means that your paper must also be described by the theory that you describe in your paper. And that means that I will be able to know essentially the parts necessary to the paper, which really helped because it's so ironic, inevitable, and just elegant that the structure of the paper will be dictated by the structure described within the paper. And that is another argument in favor of sentient singularity theory over the rest, even though everyone that I discuss in this discussion or topic is onto something and is onto something similar. None of them have the coherence of sentient singularity theory. And coherence is an intrinsic and necessary aspect of being. Okay? Because existence has to be internally consistent and coherent to exist. A consciousness has to be coherent. An observation has to be coherent. Something that is, generated has to have coherence. Everything has to have coherence. And Chris Langan discusses this as well. It's very, very important. And that coherence means that it also has to apply to your descriptions of the work. So if you say, this is my theory of everything, and I've got all these books about it, and I've got all these papers, and, they essentially, follow all these patterns, and, for instance, let's look at this. Emergence theory overview. Not ripping on anybody, because remember, I have an alternative, so it's okay, actually, for me to rip on people. Conceptual theory overview of emergence theory, clear when January 2nd, 2019. Dang, my paper looks way better than Clee's. That is all I'm going to say. So far. That doesn't mean anything. Don't judge a book by its cover, except it's part of judgment. A little bit. Emergence theory is a code-theoretic first principles-based discretized quantum field theoretic approach to quantum gravity and particle physics. This overview covers the primary set of ideas being assembled by quantum gravity research. Motivation, axioms, discretized space into a code. Actually, this is pretty good. But it's still not going to be as good as sentient singularity theory. But look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty good. Fibonacci anions. Emergence theory posits that space-time code of reality is a topological quantum superfluid. That makes perfect sense. Good job, Clee. Put differently, it is a topological quantum net. It's so funny. I spoke to Brian Keating today, and just about like the state of some things in the world of theories of everything, with physics and stuff. But he called, I think, my work a quantum or a cosmic macrame, which I actually love. It's like string theory, cosmic macrame, loop quantum gravity, fiber bundles, a topological quantum superfluid that is a topological net, quantum net. A net is a macrame. Like that, you literally macrame a net. That's how you make a net. It was funny because it was kind of said to as an insult against my work. It was. I still really like Brian. Brian is a good guy. I don't hold this against him at all, but it was an insult against my work. I think if it was describing my work, I can't think of anybody else that he would be talking about, and he does follow my work a little bit. At least, like, he follows the streams of my work. He follows my Instagram theory of Every0ne and stuff like that. And he's aware that I'm working on this stuff. But he also purposely doesn't comment on it publicly, which I totally understand. Other than to say, I know someone with a cosmic macrame. But sounds like a lot of people are onto the cosmic macrame. That's what a fiber bundle is. Interesting. The underlying quantum statistical quasi-particle in topological quantum nets is non-abelian anion, reducible to the Fibonacci anion. Quasicrystals are known to be topological phases of matter. See here, here, and here for background. The last link says surprising results suggest quasicrystals could be used to create systems with dimensionality higher than 3D. Something that could be useful both in studying fundamental physics and creating materials with new and useful properties. Yes, that's true. Interesting. The last important puzzle piece of our space-time code discrete quantum field theory program is the empire wave. Can derive the algebraic possibility space of sequences, forming each various patterns, some physically realistic and others not. However, there is probably no way our program can proceed without a clear understanding and to start a toy simulation of the empire wave. This is a statistical evolution of topological quasi-particle, probably amplitude or statistical weightings that are based strictly on principle of least computational action. Yeah, exactly. This is what I was talking about before about the number of sentient beings would dictate like the size essentially of Planck lengths and the length of Planck time essentially would be dictated by the amount of computation going on, which would be dictated by the amount of sentient beings and their interactions. And all of that summed together in motion is the empire wave, it seems. So he has the empire wave, Fibonacci anions. We have a Fibonacci sequence in our model. We have an empire wave. Energy part 2 computational savings. This is marriage structures, I think. I'll look more into this. Energy part 1. The AB equals P solution space. We must wait for further advances in computational power in order to use our space-time code to simulate emergent complex systems capable of exponential probabilistic deviations from the ordinary equilibrium statistics of quantum thermodynamics. Oh my gosh, this is deep. This is like dense. That's the right way to put it. Not deep, dense. Okay. So the primary set of ideas are motivation, axioms, discretize space-time into code. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, essentially, but it's really 6. Makes sense. Klee wrote a paper that essentially described the binary triality, but he did it in pie charts. It's good. It's good. It's fascinating to look at all this work now that I'm like working on mine. You know, here's another one. This is the paper that I originally read, the first physics paper I ever read. An Exceptionally Simple Theory of Everything by Garrett Lacey. Abstract. All fields of the Standard Model and gravity are unified as an E8 principal bundle connection. A non-compact real form of the E8 Lie algebra has G2 and F4 subalgebras which break down to strong SU3, electroweak SU2, cross U1, gravitational, so 3, 1. The frame Higgs and 3 generations of fermions related by triality, the interactions and dynamics of these one-form and Grassmann-valued parts of an E8 superconnection are described by the curvature and action over a 4-dimensional base manifold. So he has a 4-dimensional base manifold. Klee has, you know, essentially, where is it? Where's his tetrahedrons? Well, it says here, generates quasiparticles, interactions in a 4 plus 1D, and the derivative 3 plus 1D quasicrystal, which is 4. But where is your tetrahedrons? And please search in this. I don't really know. Tools. Find. Tetra. Okay, here we go. A tetrahedron. So Klee has tetrahedrons. Lacey has 4-dimensional base manifold. Eric Weinstein has, in the beginning, we will let X4 be a 4-dimensional c to the power of infinity manifold. So he has 4-dimensional c to the power of infinity manifold. x4. And then constructor theory, David Deutsch. Constructor theory is the most interesting one. It really is. Typically, also use resources and produce waste products. Very few such transformations happen spontaneously. That's to say, almost all require a constructor, which I shall define as anything that can cause transformations in physical systems without undergoing any net change in its ability to do so. I shall call those physical systems the constructor's substrates. A transformation regarded as being caused by a constructor I shall call a construction. Constructors appear under various names in physics and other fields. For instance, in thermodynamics, a heat engine is a constructor because of the condition that it be capable of operating in a cycle. But they do not currently appear in laws of physics. Indeed, there is no possible role for them in what I call the prevailing conception of fundamental physics, which is roughly as follows. Everything physical is composed of elementary constituents such as particles, fields, and space-time. There is an initial state of those constituents, and laws of motion determine how the state evolves continuously thereafter. In contrast, a construction is characterized only by its inputs and outputs and involves subsystems, the constructor and the substrate, playing different roles. And most constructors are themselves composite objects. Oh, so constructors are composite objects, kind of like a sentient being? But they're not sentient beings according to constructor theory. So in the prevailing conception, no law of physics could possibly mention them. The whole continuous process of interaction between constructor and substrate is already determined by the universal laws governing their constituents. However, the constructor theory I shall propose in this paper is not primarily the theory of constructions or constructors as the prevailing conception would require it to be. It is the theory of which transformations input state of substrates equals output state of substrates can be caused by which, so the theory of which transformations can be caused and which cannot, and why. As I shall explain, the idea is that fundamental questions of physics can be expressed in terms of those issues, and that those answers do not depend on what the constructor is, so it can be abstracted away, leaving transformations as the basic subject matter of the theory. Okay. Causation is widely regarded by philosophers as, at best, being a useful fiction having no possible role in fundamental science. Bullshit. That's what I will say to that. Hume argued that we cannot observe causation and therefore never have evidence of its existence. I disagree with that. But here I shall, with Popper, regard scientific theories as conjectured explanations, not as interferences from evidence. Observations not as a means of validating them, but only as testing them. Okay. A factory is only an approximate to one constructor. There's no perfect constructors that can exist in nature. BS. That only works when you're looking at constructors that are being animated by sentient beings but aren't sentient beings. It may be that construction tasks are the primitive entities in terms of which the laws of nature are expressed. Well, yeah, obviously. The definition of a constructor for task requires it to be a constructor for A, again, after performing an instance of A. Its other attributes may change, but what the user must do in order to cause it to perform the task must remain the same. So he's saying that there are users, constructors, constructions. Okay, we need to write this down, because that's actually important. Where is So according to constructor theory, there are users, which I call singularities or sentient. Singularity. And then there are constructors. And then there are constructions. And then there are substrates. This is a working session from here on. But obviously from before this on. But okay, he says, I shall define as a constructor as anything that can cause transformations in physical systems without undergoing any net change in its ability to do so. Shall cause those physical systems the constructor's substrates. So then we have substrates. Constructors, physical systems, and mechanisms that can cause changes in physical systems without being dramatically changed themselves. Okay? So like a car. It can be used again and again. A construction would then therefore be a transformation regarded as being caused by a constructor. A transformation caused by a constructor. This would be sentient singularity. This would be quanta of consciousness in my model. Constructions would be perspectives. And then constructions would be growth, I guess. In sentient singularity theory, constructor theory. Constructor theory has the best name other than sentient singularity theory. And constructor theory might have had the best name if a constructor was a sentient being. But the problem is that constructors, it's a theory of everything. Constructor theory is a theory of everything, but it's not a theory of every0ne, which is, so if constructor theory is a theory of these constructors, then sentient singularity theory is a theory of these, the users. And the users are primary to constructors. You cannot have a constructor without a user manipulating the constructor that is then constructing. But the problem is this is just, it's almost wrong, because the reality is that constructors and users are the same thing, and that a constructor as defined here and a construction and a user are almost like three perspectives of one thing, and the substrate is also the totality of it all. So actually this does make sense, but if your theory isn't a theory of the users and it's a theory of the constructors, but it's not even a theory of the constructors or the constructions, it's a theory of the degrees of freedom that you have, that a constructor has to create a construction. And that's true of inherently or emergently within sentient singularity theory, but it's contextualized within the most important aspect of, of its existence, which is it's a sentient being. Okay? Like, I've asked this before, is like, how do you know what theory is the best? Theory of everything is the most fundamental and primary theory. And it's like, you have to ask yourself, if I said, let's create a theory of a human theory. So there's, in human theory 1, it describes the human as a assembly of organs that are that perform various tasks and are wrapped in a bag of skin, and then pumping fluid throughout. It's like, okay, is that accurate? Yes, but would you want, if you had to decide on a theory that someone could know about you, and it was all they knew about you in order to know as much relevant information about you as possible, and they didn't even know you were human at the time, like let's say aliens come around and they're like, okay, what is a human? Would you want them to be like, meatbag theory describes human? Definitely not. That's like saying like we're hot dogs or something. That's not good. I mean, it's not bad. It's just not fundamental. It's not what I want to be known as, because that it doesn't describe my essential nature. It describes, some aspects of my structure, but it doesn't describe my essential nature. Would you want to be, speaking, running, walking, talking, seeing, hearing, structure, and that's what the human theory number 2 is? No, these are things that you do, these are actions that you do, but they don't define your essential nature. Let's go on to human theory number 3. Human theory number 3 is a replicating, binary symmetrical or bisymmetrical structure theory, like that. So you're replicating crystal that is symmetrical, in across. Bisymmetrical, if that's even the right word, but you are symmetrical in a binary form. You can be split down the middle in one direction, which is, like this, not like this. And you're replicating. You want to be does that help us understand your essential nature? No, it describes your symmetries across time and space. Time via replication, space via, your physical symmetry. The lines of your physical symmetry. And then you get to human theory number 4, the number of completeness. Would you want to be known as thinking, feeling, being? Probably. That's probably the best way to describe your essential nature. And if somebody understood one of those 4, I would say that those that understood human theory number 4, thinking, feeling, being theory, would have a better understanding of the essential nature of a human being than those that understood, replicating bisymmetrical theory, or meatbag theory, or running, walking, talking, viewing, or seeing, hearing, smelling theory. Like, none of these would give you an overall picture of the fundamental nature of a human being. And constructor theory is essentially it's meatbag theory. That's what it is. It's meatbag theory. And emergence theory is bisymmetrical replicating theory. Geometric unity is seeing, smelling, talking, running, tasting theory. And then sentient singularity theory is thinking, feeling, being theory. I'm trying to think of any other serious contenders out there that we should include as into any of these categories. I mean, CTMU is kind of like a thinking, feeling, being theory, but it's not as coherent as sentient singularity theory, and nor is it as defining in its name, nor is it as descriptive in its name of the essential nature of existence, if it is a sentient being. So, and there's others like Tom Campbell's My Big Toe, and that name isn't really, it's funny, I will admit that it's funny theory, but it's not it doesn't really have any aspects of description to it, but it's probably similar to mine, thinking, feeling, being theory. And then you have Nassim Harameyn's theory, which is, it doesn't really have a name, but it seems like it would be similar to constructor theory in that it would be like meatbag theory. Yeah, I mean, you're going to find that all these theories kind of fit into one of these more so than the other, because all of what I listed is kind of like everything you can get. It's like what you do, what is your structure, or what are you composed of, what do you look like, what do you do, and then what are you, which is inside would be it would be constructor theory or like meatbag theory, and then outside, um, uh, I guess that would be separate, and then inside would be emergence theory or like symmetries, and then outside would be like sensing theory, which is like geometric unity, which is like what do you do? And then there's oneness theory, which is sentient singularity theory. It's just amazing how close I'm like this, how complete this work is. It's, you know, when you look at this right here, this like 4-knot inside of 4-knot, which is really 8-knot instead of an 8-knot, which is 16, which is 4 times 4. So this knot right here is interesting because it's like, it's almost like it just like wraps itself into a little bow. It's like it is its own present. It is the dweller in the dwelling. It is the present and the bow that is on the present. And like sentient singularity theory does seem to be this. I really had no idea I was going to end that paper, and then I was like, well, it has to be broken down into 4 primary perspectives of sentient singularity theory, and then you can add in, you know, additional, you know, supplemental models that help, you know, you understand the context of everything and the interactions of everything and the aspects of everything, but they will even eventually inherently follow the structure of sentient singularity theory. But, you know, I have to define a sentience, a consciousness. I have to define the 4 primary perspectives. I have to define the quanta of consciousness or quantum of consciousness structure, and then I have to define the cosmological verse. And then everything in between is just like, you know, relating those structures to each other. And that's how you describe the theory of everything, like into a paper, is it follows the patterns of the theory of everything. And I haven't seen a single other piece of work do this. I mean, Eric Weinstein's theory has got 69 pages, so I don't know what that is, you know, intrinsically describing, but I don't think his paper follows the pattern described by the paper. And it should. I mean, I guarantee you it does intrinsically, but it also, like, should be made in such a way that it's like you try and follow it, like not just that it will you know, emerge that way, which it would, you know, so would sentient singularity theory. But if you're conscious of it happening, sometimes that can screw you up, like when you are focusing on dancing and then you suck at dancing or something like that. But and I found that in my work. If I try and make something follow a certain pattern, it will just fall apart. But it's that I realized that it's not that I'm trying to make my paper follow that pattern. It's that I realized it must follow that pattern, which is different than I will make it follow that pattern. I've only made 4 models, you know, that are objective. And one of them isn't even really a model. I mean, it kind of is. It's the math of, you know, reimagining 1 and 0. That is sentient singularity. That's the model of sentient singularity. Is that it's on my website. Under writings, it says reimagining 1 and 0. That is essentially, those equations are the model of a sentient singularity. And then after that, 4 primary perspectives come next. And then quantum of consciousness, and then cosmological verse. And then everything in between will just fall into place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. different things discussed in Eric Weinstein's paper. The Higgs field. I heard someone who may have wrote this paper say the Higgs is bullshit once, and I actually kind of agree with that. But it's that the Higgs field is the graviton, but it's not. The Higgs field is not it's not a particle. Like, so to think about it as that is just wrong. That's what makes it bullshit, I think. But a lot of what we think of as particles are not particles. They're perceptions of a wave. I love that he uses Hebrew, though. Some people looked at my work and they were like, Hebrew? Like, what is this, gematria? Which it wasn't. Actually, sometimes I guess it was. Only one instance. When I was looking at Yud He Vav He, that's it. But you don't have to do that. But the fact that he includes Hebrew is pretty cool. But you can see, like, I don't need to understand his work, like all of these right now, immediately, in order to see the beauty in it. Because if you look here, and you're like looking at this math, which I could not explain to you at all right now, other than I recognize the quantities like 64 and 14 and 7 and all these other quantities in here, 2/3, 3, halves, 1/2. I see all this stuff emerge in my work, and you start from 0 and you're going to 0, which means this is all that it can exist, and it is 1, and this means that 0 is infinity and 1. But you can see the symmetrical beauty of this structure. You don't have to even be able to read math, which it is a language. That's what it is. You can be not literate in mathematics and still do work on the theory of everything, because it's meta-mathematics. It's not mathematics. It's not computation. It's meta-computation. It's not physics. It's metaphysics. It's like Robert Grant's, use of symmetry to bypass computation of, infinite decimals. You can kind of use symmetry to just not calculate. You're just like perception. You're using perception instead of calculation, if that makes sense. So calculation would be subjective, but once you have creation has already occurred. But the structures that perceive and then are creative, even beyond or before creation, I guess preceding creation, they are perceptions. So you can use perception to see beyond computation. This is what warp speed is, by the way, for anybody who stuck around, the 4 people here. Warp transportation is utilizing the structures of perception instead of the constraints of computation. So computation is just movement. So like if you wanted to go very, very fast within relativity, that is computation. But if you wanted to just, like warp from one place to a next, it's because you're utilizing the structures beyond computational space-time, and you are perceiving through the structure of entanglement that gives rise to space-time, and that is what warp transportation is. And also warp or entanglement communication, so that you could communicate instantaneously, essentially, with anyone. You don't have to worry about like radio waves being constrained by light speed or anything like that. Dang, national disgrace? What are you talking about? Okay, conscious means to be aware of something. It's not a thing. It's the soul that is what is conscious. I know that. I know. That's why a sentient singularity is aware via a quantum of consciousness, which is an instance of consciousness that is created, that is self-aware, creates an instance of self-awareness via the entanglement of primary perspectives. I know, but you are right. People need to learn the difference between physics and quantum physics, but our definitions of what physics is so screwed. That's so true. Quantum physics is not the same as physics, and it's really metaphysics. Theories are part of science, but it's not true science only until theory is proven, or a theory should be held as a theory and should be not present as scientific truths. I don't really like the term science, to be honest. I think science is the figuring out of reality, which means it includes theories, and that engineering is once things become like real, and then we can use those structures to build. I swear they're so ahead. They present enough facts about time for me to think that they can time travel already. They probably laugh at how confused they have us all. What, physicists? Hell no. They have no idea what. Like, they're so confused. They don't laugh at how confused we are. If they are, then they're laughing and not realizing how confused they are as well. Hence, physics and the other is quantum physics. Simple. That's why there is a God, because nature is amazingly perfect, because us dumb monkeys aren't that skilled to perfect nature as it is. Yeah. Kind of. But yes, there's a God. In simple term, think, feel, do, basic action of consciousness, soul, of a conscious soul, yes. A true theory of everything has to be open-ended for correction, because to say it's a theory of everything is just ego, because there's no way we understand everything for a close-ended argument. That's not true. It just has to be vague enough to include everything. It doesn't have to be and buildable. It doesn't have to be open-ended. It has to be buildable. You can build on it, but it has to be vague enough to where to where it does apply to everything. Savages with a bit more intelligence, the wild monkeys, humans in a nutshell. Yes, that's the problem. Maybe meatbags with a soul, because we aren't basic animals. Animals have a soul. They do. I don't agree with anybody that says they don't. I think everyone has a bit right and some wrong, but everyone, we are all heading to the same answer, but they just can't agree to work together to get it right. Too much ego out there. That's true. Singularity. I'm the universe, live in the reality of this world, and the universe is not happy with how this world treats it. I don't know if that's true. In some ways that's true, in some ways that's not. 0, 1, 2, 3 explains it in language terms, not numerical terms. That's true. See, they know that, then how can you tell they don't know time travel? I don't know. Who? Physicists don't know Trump. Do they know? It depends on which physicists you're talking about. If there's physicists in black projects that do understand time travel, that's possible. But I don't think so. But to perceive time, maybe. Across time, maybe. But to maneuver in time, I don't really know if you can go to the past. But you can probably perceive it. And you can almost certainly perceive it, I would think. But you can go to a new location, but you're still in your own ever-present, and yeah. So warp transportation is probably possible. But that doesn't mean you can go to the future. I mean, you will go to the future. It's inherent, because you're going to the future now. But you don't really go to the future. It's that you're just in an ever-present, and you are the movement of spin causes entropy, which then forces you to act. And that sequence of the perception of action, the sequential perception of actions in a sequence is time. MBT is definitely not the best name. What is MBT? Meatbag theory, yeah. But I think he still is good, making good contribution, largely due to his research with out-of-body experiences. Oh, I wasn't calling like Tom Campbell meatbag theory. I was saying my big toe doesn't really have any description. Meatbag theory is like constructor theory, or yeah, it's like constructor theory. It's not Tom Campbell's theory. Tom Campbell's theory is probably similar to sentient singularity theory. It's like, it is a you are thinking, feeling, being theory. It's like mine, and so is the CTMU. So Tom Campbell, Chris Langan, me, they would be thinking, feeling, being theories. And then there is, constructor theory, which is meatbag theory, and emergence theory, which is, appearance theory. And then there's like action theory, or which would be like or like perception action theory, which is like geometric unity. Oh, my big toe, meatbag. I thought of it as meatbag theory. That's so funny to have the same exact initials. My big toe. Yeah, my big toe would be like a sentient, like a thinking, feeling, being theory. But the name is just not. It's funny, but it's not good because it doesn't describe itself. Like, everything has to be coherent and self-referencing. The name has to reference the pattern or the description contained within the theory, and the theory has to, description has to follow the, the patterns described within the theory. Like, it has to be self-referencing of its self-referencing, again, within itself, again and again. Like, and my big toe is funny, but it's not self-referencing. Constructor theory is. Geometric unity kind of is. Yeah, it is. It's about perceptions and degrees of freedom. And then there's like emergence theory, which is about appearance, which is like, physical symmetries and time symmetries, like whether or not you replicate. Your crystalline structure is emergence theory. It is, what is the emergent crystalline structure? So what do you look like? So what do you look like is, emergence theory. But Tom Campbell's work, my work, Chris Langan's work are all the theories that would apply to the perspective of oneness, and that would be the ones that are the best contenders for a true fundamental universal theory of existence, not just a grand unified theory which unites quantum mechanics and general relativity, even though that's basically going to be the same thing as a unified universal fundamental theory of existence of mind and matter. But it's kind of like the same issue that when I was speaking to that woman who worked for DeepMind and works for Microsoft AI, and she was telling me that a general intelligence is different than a conscious intelligence. A general intelligence can, adapt within any environment, and a conscious intelligence is one that's self-aware. And it's like, they're the same. Like, they are the same thing. They're not separate. You have to be self-aware in order to be able to adapt within any new environment, because your reference point is self. Like, you build from your world, your perception and your understanding of your world from yourself. And if you don't if you're not aware of self and you're dumped into a new environment, you're not aware of yourself, then you have nothing to be aware of. And you are not going to do anything. You're just not going to function. You're going to decay into nothingness if you are even able to manifest anything at all, any action at all. But a general intelligence and a self and a conscious intelligence are the same, and just like a grand unified theory and a universal fundamental, description of existence are the same. They're just, what are you focusing on applying it to? So if you're just using it in the context of, uniting quantum mechanics and general relativity, it's a grand unified theory. But if you're, or a grand unified field theory, but if it's a, unified field theory, which is, the theory of the fundamental and universal patterns of existence, then that's going to be the same exact patterns. It's just, are you applying them everywhere instead of just quantum mechanics and general relativity? I like meat peg theory more. It's funny. Okay, yeah, you can send me it on Discord. I think everyone there would be interested in your thoughts too. I will probably save it for tomorrow, but if you send it to me, I'll definitely play it tomorrow and discuss it. Like, that sounds like a great discussion tomorrow. So I definitely think you should send it. My Big Toe is definitely not the best name, but I think he still is making a good contribution. I agree with you completely. I think he is. I think everybody I'm speaking about is making a great contribution. Like, they are making more of a contribution to the advancement of scientific understanding and the understanding of our reality than anyone else with PhDs out there that I can think of. So my hat is off to Clear Irwin. My hat is off to Chris Langan, Tom Campbell, Eric Weinstein, Stephen Wolfram, Clear Irwin, Garrett Lacey. It's off to all of them. But my theory is still the best. It will be, at least. But it's doesn't mean that their work isn't essential. Like, it is essential. You can't just jump to my theory. You have to go through Stephen Wolfram, and then you have to go through Eric Weinstein, and then you have to go through constructor theory, and then you can get to sentient singularity theory. But you can't just jump from general relativity and the standard model to sentient singularity theory, or at least science can't. I can, but I didn't even do that, though. I went through trying to understand mind and AI and consciousness and everything. So I didn't even do that, but I just didn't get to my theory by studying these other theories. But science as a collective, societal endeavor will have to go through these other theories before it gets to mine, probably. But it's like the CTMU. It's way too ahead of its time. You have to go... I told this to Chris Langan, because he was basically saying, like, none of these other theories compare to his. And I was like, but they're steps in the right direction. And we have to go through these before we get to the CTMU. And he agreed. But, that doesn't... But the CTMU, I would say, is essentially... Like, I don't even think constructor theory is really a competitor, or like geometric unity is a competitor, or emergence theory is a competitor to sentient singularity theory. I would say CTMU is kind of a competitor to sentient singularity theory, and probably my Big Toe as well. But then is an endorsement to their work being, extremely good. Otherwise, they wouldn't even be competitors. and they wouldn't even be discussed, but to be a competitor to sentient singularity theory means like you are really pretty much like a fundamental theory of the fundamental nature of existence, which is sentience. And so like constructor theory is a theory of constructors, which basically means like if constructor theory is the theory of your car's engine and your lamp and your computer and your air conditioning, sentient singularity theory is the theory of the user of the air conditioning, the lamp, the car, the air conditioning. But also the creator of all those things. Those things did not create themselves. They were created by sentient beings, which is, a user or creator. But it's just confusing because constructor theory I don't really like the term constructor for a non-sentient being or non-sentience. It should be applied to a sentient being. And in a way, it is like your body is a constructor, but you as a soul are sentience. Just like you are a sentient singularity that is composed of a pattern that is known as a quantum of consciousness or quanta of consciousness. That is like your body. So it's the body of the mind. And the quantum of consciousness would be the head part of your body. And or it would be the perceiving and like leading part of your body, which would be your senses and your like computational abilities, and then your primary perspectives or your primary parameters would be like your limbs and senses. So your primary parameters would be your limbs, primary senses, or your primary perspectives would be your senses, and then the quantum of consciousness, that is the union of the two, is essentially your body. And then the mind that is that is inhabiting that body, animating that body, and created of that body is the sentient singularity. So it's like difficult to describe, but there is this aspect that is, it's like they're almost the same. You are almost your body. People say you're not your body, like you're different from your body. It's like, no, your mind is your body, like in and beyond your body. It's both. So that abstract self concept is your sentient singularity, but it is, maneuvering and interpreting and orienting and making sense of the world via your body, which is really your mind. There is no like a body is just, it is the tails and that follows the heads, which is your mind. There is no head, body, tails. It's just head, body, or heads and tails. And like I said, you can't look at both at once, so I'm running out of coins here because I keep dropping them on the floor. But you can't look at tails and heads at the same time, but they are dependent and linked and inseparable, just like you cannot look at the assembly and the singularity at the same time. People ask me, like, why aren't you able to look at, like all to experience all your cells at once in like a through the subjective perspectives of them, being perceived as objective first person perspectives. And that's because of the constraint of mind being such that if you're focusing on something, it must be a single point, because you can't focus on two things at once. Like, you have to, in order to think, you have to have a hierarchy, which means you have to organize information into a structure that of prioritization, which means you have to break it into singularities to process. One of the greatest lessons I've been taught is by a mentor of mine who was a famous herpetologist, zoologist. And when I was younger, I would be like, I'm gonna get this kind of lizard and 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 these kinds of snakes, all like, now. And he would be like, don't start a new project until you have succeeded at the old one, at the first one. Like, don't start two projects at once. Like, you have to finish one project before you can really start the next. Otherwise, you're going to just be, scatterbrained and disorganized, and you're not going to succeed as well at either of them. You're just going to, as you would if you just succeeded at one and then moved on to the next. And he's right. That's the reality. There's that book that was created, like The One Thing. It's like, pick the one thing. And during my wedding, Paulina would kind of like, I would walk into the room as we were planning our wedding, and I would be like, she'd be like, we have to talk about the wedding. I'd be like, okay, what are we going to talk about? She'd be like, everything. I'm like, you can't say that. You have to choose one. What's the one thing that we're going to talk about? And we can even organize 3 things, but like, it has to go first this, then this, then this. Then that's it. We can't just say, we have to talk about everything, because it just was so overwhelming for me mentally. I would get so frustrated with it. And I will say, women are much better at like looking at the entirety of the environment at once. They just are, because you have to do that to raise infants. You have to be like, where is that baby crawling, and what's dangerous on that side of the room, and 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 like, what do I have to clean up over here? Versus men are like, what do I need to build? It's just we're much more sequential thinkers. And that means that we're just really, really bad at like thinking about a lot of things in, a relatively small time frame. I don't even want to say at once, because I don't think you can do that, but women can jump between tasks is what it is. They can jump between cleaning, and jump between planning, and jump between paying the bills, and jump between planning, a trip. And men are like, don't even talk to me until I'm done with this. I think everyone, true, my reality is not your reality, but everyone shares a reality. That's automatically 3 different points of view. Yep. I don't think Tom would describe his theory as competing with anyone else's, because it's his big toe, in a sense that no one else should just adopt it. I agree. And I don't even think about mine as competing. But I would say that maybe competing is not the right word, because I don't think that it really is about competing. If they're all the same thing, essentially, they're not competing. But what I mean by that is that they are fundamentally focused. Their focus is on the same thing. They are very aligned. That's what I'll say. They're not competing, they're aligned. That's a very good way to put it. I don't think competition exists in a theory of everything world. Although I will say, I think Sentient Singularity Theory has the most coherence. But even then, that sounds like a competitive statement. There's no way around that. I don't really know the way around that. But it's not trying to do something that others aren't, or faster than others. It's that it's just about coherence. Like that's it. It's not about being competitive. Like you can't compete. Like there's no problem that you have to solve before everyone else, and that's the problem. And like it's a competition of who gets there first. That's like saying a theory of everything is like a competition of who can think about the most things. Like there is no winner in that. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. But or it's really like who's the most self-aware. It's like that's not really, how do you define that? You know, like that it's not a competition. It's not a race. There's no race, there's no competition, but it does seem like that because of ego. And it is because of ego. And you know, I know that it sounds like this is an egotistical statement of me to say like, oh, Sentient Singularity Theory is the most coherent and like it's the most fundamental and universal of them all. And I stand by that, but it's not because it's an egotistical statement. I didn't even have a name until like 3-4 months ago, and I've been working on this project for years. I was like happy to just say geometric unity is probably it, and like we'll just call it geometric unity, and I'd love to discuss it. It wasn't the goal wasn't to have the theory of everything. It was to be involved in the conversation and to understand the patterns and to map them, but not to have a separate theory. But I did have like an epiphany. Some of you might have been there for it, months ago, where I was like, I had done a stream about how it doesn't matter what it's called. And then the next day I was like, guys, it actually definitely matters what it's called, because I thought more about it and I had like an epiphany about how the coherence of the description of the theory, of the patterns contained within the theory, must be coherent with the patterns described by the theory, and then the name of the theory must also be coherent with the descriptions of the patterns outlined within the theory. So it can't just be, you can't break the coherence there. You have to be like, you have to continue it as far as you can go, which you can go totally. And you can't, there is no point in which coherence stops. This is where Stephen Wolfram is wrong, where he's like, the universe isn't conscious because there are different models of information, processing structures that don't seem to be coherent with each other. Wrong. There is complete coherence within all that exists. And you can push that coherence totally. And so any theory, and you should push any description of existence to maintain that coherence as completely and as consistently as possible. And that includes in the name. It should describe the essential nature of existence. A sentient being, sentient singularity is one thinking, feeling, self-aware being. That's what sentient singularity means. Sentience is a self-aware level of consciousness that is due to feeling. And a singularity is one, but it's like infinite oneness. So it's like an infinitely one, infinite thinking, feeling, self-aware beings within one thinking, feeling, self-aware being. That is like all the information that is like contained within that name, Sentient Singularity Theory. Whereas like not even cognitive theoretic model of the universe contains all that. And neither does geometric unity, which, I mean, or emergence theory. Geometric unity contains a lot. Emergence theory focuses on the idea, which is true, that there's really only one way to create a universe, and it's just kind of emergent. But that doesn't mean it's emergent without cause. It is caused, but the structure is emergent. But the structure of the structure is emergent, but the structure itself that is created is caused consciously. It's not emergent outside of a conscious action by a sentient being. My big toe describes parallel processing or multitasking as just rapid oscillation between multiple serial states. So you're in complete agreement again. Dude, Tom Campbell is brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. So far, he is now, I think, the only one that I'm not in a disagreement with. I think he has surpassed Chris Langan even. I don't think there's any, but I just forget about him because I don't really like read his work, but you tell me about him, and like I know enough from you that I've never heard anything that I disagreed with. Definitely. Everything that I thought I disagreed with, we have like reconciled. He is just providing it in hopes it will help others on their journey to their own big toe. See, I'm similar, but I mean, yeah, that's essentially what I'm doing. I don't really know if I would call it their own big toe, because I don't think that this is my big toe. Like, I don't think this is my theory. I think this is just existence, and I'm just helping describe it, and like I'd like to help people see it. But I predict it to some degree. And you know, be able to predict what is predictable with it and what isn't, and you know, what the implications are for their life and what their responsibilities would be in that structure. You know, but it's not my theory, it's not their theory. It's like it's the theory of everyone. Like, I'm trying to help people find the theory of everyone, which is the theory of everyone, and you know, also every one of everyone. It's like, you know, it's symmetrical and like consistent, that or it's, you can apply it both ways. You can be like meaning everyone and everyone, which is like really the same thing, but the focus has shifted from the collective as a whole to in the individuals that make up the collective. But it's really the same structure. But you can't look at both at the same time, just like heads and tails. Tails would be the collective as a whole, that is, if you're talking about God. But if you're talking about anything within God, then it's almost like God's tails is our heads and our heads is God's tails, almost. But it's really that our heads are God's tails and God's head is, yeah, I mean, I guess it is our tails. It's just like, it's just infinite. it applies to coin analogy as well, because if you spin the coin, you can perceive both heads and tails simultaneously, but really it's just rapid oscillation. That's true. And you can only see what you choose to see when you do that. Like if you do that, you just test this real quick to make sure I'm not. If you spin a coin, wow, I don't really have much space here. I'm spinning it way too fast. But if you spin a coin and you like want to see heads, you'll see heads. And if you want to see tails, you will see tails. It's dependent upon your focus even then. But yeah, it's due to rapid oscillation that allows you to see either. But you still only see what you focus on, which is weird. But also not weird at all. It's like totally exactly what you'd expect. Left brain, right brain, logic, emotion, male, female. Think the difference between feel. Thinking and feeling, yeah, they're like two sides of the same coin, but also not really. It's like really just, it's just the generationality of thinking, so of information processing. So thinking would be generation 1. And, or it'd be like calculation that isn't thinking, like your calculator. That is generation 1. Thinking is generation 2, which is like you're thinking towards a goal and you have context that are included. So that is included. So in calculation, like a calculator, it's no context. It's just pure computation. No context. Then there's thinking, which is like you do have context. And then there's feeling, which you have even stronger context. And that context is you. You are the context. And so that's actually brilliant. It's like computing versus thinking versus feeling. It is the triality of information processing. That's genius. I'm writing that down. So computing, thinking, and feeling. Computing is calculation without context. Here, you guys can see what I'm seeing. And then thinking is calculation with context. And then feeling is calculation contextualized by the self. So how does it relate to you? How does the information processing relate to you? Being processed relate to you? Calculation with context. How does the information relate to other information? How does the information being processed relate to other information? How does the information being processed relate to yourself or oneself? Let's say that. And calculation without context is processing of information that is irrelevant. To understanding the triality of information processing. Dope. That's cool. I've never done that. And then you would also do like, so this is thinking and feeling, so then you would do acting. So what is the triality of acting? You would do like, it'd be like growing, building, and communicating. I don't know if that's correct, but I think so. What about the triality of being? The triality of being be like, I think it would just be like, growing, I don't know, it would be like experiencing, changing, like creating, experiencing, creating, be experiencing, creating, and what would be the third one? And then we'll probably get out of here. This is only 2 people left hardcore enough for this kind of like abstraction. Creating, experiencing, so I think it would be this. Essentially, it's thought, speech, and action, but like, it would be like experiencing, maybe this would be like communicating, and then it would be like or like describing. Be like, yeah, describing, I think. So like you're organizing, you're thinking. It's like you're experiencing in the moment, you're thinking about the moment and like making sense of it. So whatever it is that's like making sense. And then you're creating, a moment. So experiencing, describing, and creating. This would be triality of creation, triality of being, constructing, maybe. Essentially like that. There's always this triality. This is found in the CTMU and the Bible and everything, and the standard model, and space-time. Past, present, future, forwards, backwards, present, location, X, Y, Z. It's all length, width, height. It's all trialic. But then there's the totality, which is of the viewing of the thing that is being perceived from various perspectives. Then you can view it all as a quantum, and that is like oneness, which is like the fourth aspect, which is quadratic. It's interesting when you look at so if I go to Microsoft Word, let's go down through all these pages of this draw, and we're going to draw a bit. Okay, cool. So here you have 1 point, and actually, let's insert a shape, and let's do one of these. Okay. And wait. Boom. Okay. Okay, well, that's fine. So if this is a square, and we'll make it a square. That's a square. Yeah. Okay. And you have now where's the pen? Draw. Okay. You have this point right here. And you have, so that this point right here. Let's do this. Make it. Okay, there's a point. There's a point. And there's a point. This is trialic. Okay, it's a triangle. And you can tell because you can literally insert what could we do here? Just a line. There. And, whoa. We can go. Here. I know this is like kind of slow going, but I never do this, so bear with me. And then we go here. I kind of had this revelation the other day. This is trialic. And so you could be like, this is inside, outside, separateness. And then you can go in and you add in this fourth perspective. And this fourth perspective is oneness. Okay, so it's basically like crisscrossing. So you have that relationship, and then you have this one, and then you add in, because this is inside and outside, they are dependent, and then you have the intersection of inside of outside and outside of inside, which is separateness. And then separateness is dependent on oneness because oneness is inside of separateness. And it's almost like this is oneness, really. And then what you would do is you would basically be like, okay, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, and boom. And then what this allows for is for you to essentially, this is such a terrible job of this. Gosh, I need to like film this on its own and not while I'm live. But what's interesting about this is that it is really a square, okay? So it's that you take this one and then you just reflect it within this other one that really creates like, it's almost like a square within itself. It's like, some people are like, oh, is it a square? Is it a triangle? Well, it's, and I've said before, it's both, but it's a square of triangles is a good way to describe it. So dang, this is actually like an interesting shape. It's kind of like this. It's like the square is created within and by triangles. So you could even like maybe have that. And then this would be right here. So that's what it is. It would be like inside, outside, separate, oneness. Okay? Or inside, outside, separate, oneness. This is either oneness or separateness, or this is either oneness or separateness, but this is inside and outside, probably. Or maybe this is oneness, this is separateness, this is outside, and this is inside. That's probably what it is. But this shape is very interesting because it's a square inside of a triangle that ends up forming two triangles in a square. What is 180, 90, 90, 90, 360 plus 180 plus 180 is what, 720? If that's the case, then this is the shape that I'm looking for. So you have a triangle and another triangle, and then you have a square. And we're looking for 720, and this would be 360 because it's 90 equals 90 times 4. And then this would be equals 180. Boom. I was right. That's pretty sick. This shape, Robert Grant is always telling me I need to like draw. It's like, you will learn things if you draw. Like, even though, you know, you got your Excel stuff, like, you gotta draw. He's right, apparently, because that is amazing. A square within a triangle, a big triangle that is also creating of two smaller triangles is going to create 720 degrees of rotation, which is exactly the amount that we are looking for. That's amazing. I'm going to end it on that because that is pretty profound. See if there's any other questions. Like saying we all work to make God happy, but what makes God happy is what makes us all happy. No, that's not true. What makes us happy is not true. That it always is what makes God happy. That's not true. That's called blasphemy. It's blasphemy is really you applying your desires to God because you're saying like, well, I like, you know, heroin, so God must like I like doing heroin, so God must like when I'm doing heroin. It's like, that's blasphemy. Like actual blasphemy. Not, it doesn't mean like you say, you know, God damn it. I mean, it's a layer, but it's not the most important layer. And if you, like, I like that attitude. This is all our work, past knowledge and new. We all worked together to get to this point. That's true. And if you want to see both, you can see both. Yep. But you can think of the correct actions, but feeling lazy, which will deny you logic. What about the triality of being? It's not about being at boredom, weird God's TV soap opera. Kind of, that's true. Connectivity. But we're also, you know, his creation and his children and his art and his everything. The art of what you do is the cause and effect of good result or bad. Fourth is balance and harmony, fractal. Yeah. Just like music, 3 notes make a chord. Yeah, you have 3 notes and then the chord. I think, I don't know. I'm not good at music, but if you're right, then yeah. That chord is oneness. But there's also 4 chord songs that, you know, our mind perceives 4 chords as complete. The sphere in the square cylinder. That's the real trippy one. Yes, that's true. Fascinating. Look at that. It's so cool. But I'm gonna have to make a good version of this structure. But what it shows is that Robert Grant is right, and that right triangles are, they are the objective 2D pixel that is infinitely fractalable. But what it also shows is why my work is squares. You know, there's a guy on our Discord who's always there. He goes by Sup. Sup asked me once, he's from India, why are some people focused on squares, some people focused on triangles? You know, you say square feet, not triangle feet. It's like very funny. But he's right. And I focus on, you know, squares always because I'm working in the context of a cell normally, which is, you know, these are squares. These cells are rectangular. But I had to overcome that a bit here because and look at how we figured something out. Robert Grant was right. That's not surprising. But I think this actually adds to his work because it shows why right triangles are. Like I said to Sup, it's the combination of squares and triangles because there are 3 actions, a triality of action for every 4 primary perspectives that are perceived. There's a triality of 3 actions between those 4 primary perspectives, or those 4 perceived perspectives. But you have the beginning state, then you have an action, then you have the next perception perspective, then you have an action, then you have the next perspective, then you have an action, then you have the next perspective. So you have 4 perspectives and 3 actions. And that's part of my work, my paper that I'm writing, and I'll talk about it once it's done. But if you join our Discord, you will see me talk about it on Thursday, and I did a bit last week too before I released the paper. You can check it out. But this is awesome. I'm gonna have to work that in, and it's very cool. Like the constructions going into my paper are very cool. Like here's your glimpse, your sneak peek. It's substantial. It's very what's it called? Rigorous. And it even forms a right triangle that is a reflection of another right triangle that together form a square. Fascinating. Look at that. You know, it's fascinating because in the context of this structure that I've built, you have 72, which is 720, you know, joints, and 360 joints in each triangle, 36 joints in each triangle, and there's 720 as a count of all of the structures, the cells containing information that is here. So, like, this appears to be the foundation of even, like, angles, like the numbers that we use for certain angles or degrees of rotation. So like 90 degrees or 360 degrees or 180 or 720. This is seems to be almost like the cause of it. 71. $72. By the way, the sum is 50, and the count is 72 when I just go across, and then just that point, just like the last point right here, to make that structure. If I highlight everything, the count is 720, and the sum is 500, so it's literally times 10. And I didn't do that on purpose. I have no idea how that happened, but it just shows this is the kind of stuff that you get when you just follow the beauty method in science, or like symmetry. You get symmetry. So you get symmetry within symmetries. Why is it that the outline is 72 and 50 as the sum, and a count of 72? And then if you highlight it all, you get a count of 720 and a sum of 500. It's literally times 10. What are the odds? Probably, not even probably, definitely 100%. That's fascinating. I need to think more about that. But yeah, this is going to be in the paper that I'm writing, and and it's like amazing. I made this thing in one night. I was just like messing around, and I was like, well, I wonder what this will do. I bet you it will do this, and it did. And then I was like, I bet you this will do this if I continue to take it, and it did. And then I was like, I wonder if it will do it again and continue the pattern and of symmetry, and it did. Which now this is complete structure. There's no going further. So cool. 1, 4, 9. Do they seem special? Yes, it goes 1, then it goes to 4, then it goes to 9, then it goes to, depends on what you're focusing on, but it goes to like 81 or 720. I mean, it just depends on what you can go. It just depends on what you focus on. But yeah, 1, 4, and 9 are it. Like that's it. They make up everything. What is 1, 4, and 9? So 13 plus 1 is 14. So Eric Weinstein's Observerse is 14 dimensions, and I found 14 dimensions as 14 perspectives of the fermions as well. So that's interesting that 1 plus 4 plus 9 is 14. Plus 14 times 3 is the generations between, Adam and the Messiah. Which is 42. 14 plus 14 plus 14 is 42. I agree, squares are the 1, then 2 is the curve, then 3 is the xyz. The sphere is the square in the square cylinder. 1, 4, and 9. Let's see something here. So if you're going to do work like this, by the way, before I get out of here, this is how you do it. You're like, and this, I've never done this before, so this is just a test. 1, you're going to go, let's just, and then let's remove. Actually, let's leave that, and we'll do 1, 4, 9. 1, 4, 9, and 1, 4, 9. Okay, so here we're gonna go equals this plus this plus this, and then here we're gonna go equals this times this times this, and we'll see what that gets us. Sum is 50. Interesting. And then I think this would be like plus this. And then this would be like 393. I feel like I screwed that up. Maybe not. I mean, there is a symmetry going on. But I can't really say that I get it. Maybe here. This plus. Interesting. This is literally what I'll just do like late into the night sometimes. 7:29. Very interesting. I mean, again, obviously that makes sense, but equals this. Now you do this plus this. 8:29, and then here you would do this plus 8:30. Okay, so you've done this side, this side, this side. We have to do one more side. So here we'll do equals this. Equals this times this times. I bet you we're going to get something cool. If you don't see the beauty, it's not done. Equals this plus this equals this plus this. 880 equals this plus this. 17. What is the sum? 3878. 3878. Let's see here. Oh, wait, you guys didn't even see that. I'm sorry. This is what I was doing. There's a bunch of symmetries here. It's just a symmetrically calculative structure. 3878 is the sum. An even composite composed of 3 prime numbers multiplied together. 2, 7, and 2, 7, 7. That's interesting. So like 2 and 7 and 2 7s. Huh. Has 8 divisors. Anyways, I'm out, guys. I think I have gotten into the weeds enough. But yeah, Phantom, Ethan, you can send me the videos you want to talk about tomorrow, and I can discuss them on my stream. If we suppose this gives rise to angle, what do you think it suggests about the nature of angles for squares and radians? I need to think about it, but something profound. It's also 1 squared, 2 squared, and 3 squared. Yeah, I know that. That I know. And that's fascinating because my model goes from a sentient singularity, 4 primary perspectives, a 9-dimensional quantum of consciousness, and then a 720-degree cosmological verse that is composed of 162 quanta of consciousness. And 162 is 3 times 6 times 9. And the 9-dimensional quantum of consciousness on the addition aspects of it is 369. So right here, 369. And then when that scales up, you get 162 of those overlapping in this. And 162 is 3 times 6 times 9. So it's a symmetry. This is 3 times 6 times 9. And then a quantum of consciousness is 369 resulting from addition. So versus 162 resulting from multiplication of 3 times 6 times 9. So it's like the addition here creates the 369 here. That then gets multiplied. To 162. And what is 72 real quick? Just 720. It's a fascinating number. It's because it's 2 to the power 4 times 3 to the power 2, or 3 squared, times 5. So it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times 3 times 5. It's 30 divisors and 24. Okay. So what if you're like equals 9 times 24? What is that? 260. Look at that. 720 divided by 162 is 4.44444 repeating forever. That is coherence. It is the same pattern within it as without, because without is on the left side of the decimal is without, on the right side of the decimal is within, and then each successive decimal point after to the right of the previous is within the previous. So it's 4 outside and 4 inside, and then 4 inside of inside, and then 4 inside of 4 inside, and 4 inside of 4 inside, and 4 inside, and 4 inside, and 4 inside of 4 inside, and 4 inside, and 4 inside, literally infinitely repeating. So there's definitely something about that 162 and 720 that form a very, very important relationship here, because I'm going to think about that when I get off here, because that is right there. That's like the description of existence. And I've never done that before. But 162 is 3 times 6 times 9. And I guess equals 24 times 6 times 2. What is that? No. Equals 720 divided by 24. It's 30. 720 divided by 6 is 120. $80. What is it? Equals 19 times 33. I don't know. Anyways, I'm gonna go, guys. I'm getting into the weeds, but that is profound. 720 divided by 162 equals 4.4 repeating infinitely. The odds of that are 100%. I found that interesting when I studied law of falling body rates. If we suppose this gives rise to angle, it's also 1. Yes. 180 degrees is pi radians. Night, everyone. New clips coming this week. Cool. Let me know how I can help with that. Also, if there's any way for me to help with that. I've been trying to be kind of hands off, but if there's a way of helping make that easier, let me know. I'm excited though to see what they are. A coherent harmonic balance. Yeah, probably, but I don't know enough about music to tell you. Peace, guys. I'll be back tomorrow. And we'll discuss probably the videos that Theory of Everyone clips or Ethan sends about Tom Campbell's work. How do I get off this now? Peace.